sound check here. Some new equipment, and we'll see. Give it just a second. Good morning, Eric. And a check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Compelling podcasting, isn't it? All right, let's get started. It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a Monday morning. It's a random day off school, so I figured I would do a podcast on this Monday. The question was, what would we talk about? And with Illinois basketball, there's never any shortage of things to talk about. So we are here a few days after some major news dropped with Morez Johnson entering the transfer portal. There were murmurings middle of last week. They were refuted. The sources I know said, maybe, no, it looks good. And then all of a sudden Friday, just the hammer dropped. And Morez Johnson put his name in the portal. And I will be honest, for being a fan that has become accustomed to the transfer portal and not getting too high or too low on that after a few early lessons, let's say with the Adam Miller situation back in 2021, this one hit. I mean, this was jarring. And to me, it raised a lot of questions that have been lingering inside my own head. And unfortunately, over the course of the weekend, there have been just little nuggets here and there that have not eased my concerns as we enter this offseason. They're all consequential offseasons at this point. Every team is dealing with attrition. That is true. Every team is trying their best to retain the guys that they want to, and some are having more success than others. What we're going to talk about today, of course, is Morez, and of course, Tre, and who knows, maybe when I'm doing this, and keep me posted, YouTube chat, if another name drops, because it can really happen that quickly. I think what we'll be talking about today is the direction of this offseason, but also some concerns about what might be going on at Ubben. And the tricky thing with this conversation is there's a speculative nature to it where I'm going to be very careful to toe the line between not reporting or acting on rumors, but instead kind of taking a hypothetical approach to, okay, what might be amiss? What is reasonable to talk about in terms of the attrition that we're seeing, both in terms of personnel on the court and then really the staff, if you look at that the last few years as well. And what are things that Brad Underwood could do to retain the most important guys, to build on things from year to year without having to completely reconstitute a roster? And this leads me to my opening point. When you look at the Final Four and the teams that are going to be playing next weekend, all 1 seeds, this is not a huge shock for this year because all year long these 4 teams were the cream of the crop. And they really just they really proved that in rather emphatic fashion this weekend. I mean, what was the closest game? Texas Tech and Florida was an excellent game, but the others, you kind of knew fairly early on where those were going in terms of who would win. I'm going to pull up a stat here from Evan Maya, who does a lot of these metrics for college basketball. And what he was getting to in a post was just how important retention is. There is an exception to this. Duke is an exception. According to Evan Miyakawa, 22% of their minutes for Duke came from returning players. Okay, so they are the aberration here. They're a team that's just full of 5-star studs. And John Shire, got to give him credit. I mean, I wasn't sure if Duke would be able to continue what they did with Coach K after he left. It seemed like maybe that was a situation where the coach was the most important factor, but silly me. That's a program that has the resources, has the backing of Nike, and John Shire, to his credit, is proving himself to be a pretty damn good coach. Houston, 82% of their minutes come from returning players. 82%. Florida, 70. Auburn, 69%. Nice. Look at those numbers, and that is where my biggest concern lies going forward. Brad Underwood, to his credit, is one who does not lack ambition. He wants to win a national title. We all want to win a national title, and I like the fact that he speaks to it. Retention is a part of that, because not trying to, put down our program, we aren't going to go out and get a crop like Duke is. Even in the NIL era, that's not going to happen. Okay, so what do you do instead? Well, Brad Underwood has shown he can go out and get talent. He did this year. 2 first-round picks, a really good big man in Tomislav Ivicic, a really good freshman at a high school big man in Morez Johnson, a good transfer in Tre White, a former 5-star point guard transfer in Colin Boswell, and it amounted to a second-round exit in a game that was not particularly close. If we are to hold this program to the same level of expectations Brad Underwood does, the attrition of key players cannot continue to happen at the level that it's happening. And we enter this offseason. It's early. A lot of things can and will happen. But this is, as I tweeted Friday, an inauspicious start, because the path of least resistance and the path to the greatest success next year was keeping a core intact and building around that. That is out the window. I really like Kylan. I really like Tommy. If you keep those two, there are teams in far worse shape than you are. But for this team to have maximized where they were going to be, the more important players they kept, the better. That is not really feasible at this point. So it's not even April. It's just a week after the season ended, and we kind of know what offseason we're looking at, which is completely rebuilding a roster. I want to use an analogy that Trevor had posted in our thread, me, him, and Isaac. And he was just making this point. I'm going to expand on it with a further analogy. But I was trying to pinpoint in our conversation what it was about the Brad Underwood experience that at sometimes can be almost manic, when in my mind it doesn't have to be so. I acknowledge the transfer portal era. I acknowledge all the craziness that ensues because of that. In my mind, though, I can't quite place a finger on it. What is it about Brad Underwood and the way he operates that is sort of like watching a Michael Bay action movie? I mean, you're never going to be bored. And sometimes the scenes are going to hit just right. It's going to be really cool, and you're going to see, wow, that's what they intended to do. But other times, they're like lightning quick editing and boom, 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 one shot after the other. You take a breath, and you're like, I need to go get some popcorn or something. I got to chill. And the analogy that Trevor used that I thought was fairly fitting, Brad Underwood could very well have his hands on 10-2. He's driving this car, right? He is the leader of this program. He is the captain of the ship. He is the driver of this automobile. He could have his hands on 10-2. He could take I-57 from Champaign to Chicago 2 hours flat. He could do that. And in my mind, what he's doing instead, he's got the window rolled down, a cigarette in one hand. He's got one hand on the wheel. He's got some Bachman Turner overdrive blasting on the stereo of his convertible. And he's driving 85 miles per hour on all those little side highways instead. And despite all of this, yeah, he's going to find a way to get there in Chicago in about 2 hours, but he's going to make one hell of an adventure of it. Now, however you get there is fine, if the end result leads you to success. And the last 6 years, Brad Underwood has had tangible success here. Essentially 6 straight tournaments, 3 banners in the rafters, 2 from the Big Ten tournament, 1 from Big Ten regular season championship. You should probably have another up there from the Michigan thing back in 2021. You did make an Elite 8 last year. That counts. But the one thing that I've learned in fandom, you can't take anything for granted. You can acknowledge on one hand the success that has come before. You can acknowledge the fact that this program is in much better shape than it was when Brad inherited it. It was a mess. That is all credit to him. His legacy is someone that helped resurrect Illini basketball. That is secure. That's not going anywhere. But what I've also learned in my fandom is that things can change. And they can change very quickly. And I want to be very careful as I address this. This episode and the future podcast are by no means going to be calling for firing, because that ain't going to happen, nor should it happen. It's not going to be really pontificating on, who would be the next guy to lead Illinois, because I don't know who that would be. And that's not really a conversation that can or should be happening right now. But I do think it is fair as a fan base to look at what's in front of you. And instead of constantly pivoting and saying, well, John Gross sucked, therefore Brad Underwood is infallible, instead saying, okay, what are the areas of this program that Brad has done overall a very good job with that could still be improved upon? And that's really it. I'm not trying to sidestep around any larger issues. We're going to talk about those. But in order to do so, and in order for this program to maybe someday win that national title, that damn elusive title, or just to get back to a Final Four, which I acknowledge the crapshoot that is the tournament, but just, not every loss in their NCAA tournament games be by double digits and not even really be competitive in them. There is a path forward. We have resources. We have the fan base. We have an athletic director that I think we all have faith in. So what can Brad Underwood do in order to maximize what this program can be? And it's not even April. Again, we are going to have a long off season ahead, and many things can happen. I just think that it would behoove us in these conversations to not just pivot back to, it'll be fine, because we don't know that it's going to be fine. Just because he's been able to do a pretty damn good job as far as reclamation projects after guys leave and then going out and getting more talent. Just because that's happened in the past does not guarantee anything going into the future. There's a trend, and you should be confident he's going to get guys, and I still am. But are you as confident today as you were a year ago that Brad Underwood is going to be able to constitute a roster that is capable of a deep run in the NCAA tournament? Are you as confident on March 31st, 2025, saying that as you were March 31st, 2024? And if not, then I think that's worthy of conversation. So, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, and hello, YouTube, joining me on this Monday morning, and put your thoughts in there, okay? Please. Because I will get to those in the YouTube feed. I didn't put anything on Twitter because I feel like a lot of the things that are kind of being bandied about on the message boards and all that, you can go out there to Loyalty or Inquirer or any of these places, and you can kind of see all the things being chatted about. For the YouTube feed, though, throw those in, and I'll get to those. 200 Level brought to you by Hamilton Walkers. Just had a dinner there last week with some friends. We were paying off an old bet, and I was all too happy to pay for that bet in Hamilton Walkers experience than just straight cash. So here's what we got. A group of 4 of us. We started off with an old-fashioned. Duh. Still the best in town. What did we get for... Oh, yeah. We got some shrimp cocktail for an appetizer. 4 of us, 4 gigantic, super fresh shrimp. Amazing cocktail sauce. Again, all this is a scratch kitchen, so they make it there. That was our appetizer. We get the side, for me, side Caesar salad before I get my 14-ounce boneless ribeye. I went medium. Now, I am perhaps a little too careful with how my food's being cooked, but it was still super good. I like a ribeye. I often get the twin petite fillets, but I want to get something bigger. We shared steak fries and mac and cheese on the sides, and then we got for dessert, let's see, cheesecake and it was like a s'more pudding kind of cake thing. It was freaking good. One of my friends got a Sazerac, which is another whiskey-based drink, but it's rye with an absinthe rinse. Super good drink. Had a taste of that. 5-star experience. Hamilton Walkers, downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits. Appreciate Nathan and the staff over there. Also got to thank Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call today at 217-841-4728. You can get your AC check scheduled. We're going to do that here in the month of April. But On top of that, they have a deal going on right now where with a new HVAC system, you will get a free hot water heater. They'll install all of it. They are experts at that. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend, at 217-841-4728. Also, got to thank, let's see here, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. It is that season where a lot of people are getting a head start on their next home project. You can check out a gallery of their work and get a free quote while you're at it at owenbuildersllc.com. And finally, State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he could be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Champagne Showers Podcast Network, appreciate them and appreciate you, the listener or the viewer. So again, good morning, YouTube, and fill up that chat feed as much as you want. Okay. Quick drink of my coffee here. So let's talk about Morez. And we can start by acknowledging it sucks. It just sucks. Adam Miller sucked. I remember going live right after that. This is, COVID was still kind of going on. It was easing up a bit at the end of that 2021 NCAA tournament. We were already bummed by the Loyola thing, shell-shocked, if you will, and then Adam Miller leaves. A pretty dumb decision. It's funny. There was one guy that after I criticized Adam Miller's departure, and maybe it was a year later, and it said, it's just a bummer to see this former Illinois Mr. Basketball now in the Where Are They Now file. And someone said, don't talk about my friend like that. Yeah, sorry, pal, but a fairly forgettable career for Adam Miller after what started so promising. So a bummer at the time. He still would have been a very helpful piece, but Alfonso Plummer really filled that role well and helped lead you to a Big Ten regular season title. Brad Underwood figured it out. Now, Kofi coming back, Trent, DeMonte, retention, Coleman back. That team, Jacob Grandison, brought back many of the pieces, really any piece not named Io or Adam Miller. Andre Curbelo was back despite being inconsistent. I still think that was maybe Brad's best coaching job out of all the years that he's been here, because that team was good. I don't know, even with Kofi, if they necessarily should have won a conference title, but they found their way to it. So that was a remarkably good coaching job from Brad Underwood. Okay, so Adam Miller was the only thing I could really compare it to in terms of ouch. That hurts. But I think Morez, despite not being the immediate impact guy that Adam Miller was, if you look at Adam Miller's stats, he was a starter for every single game. He was a double-digit scorer. He was a good three-point shooter, solid defender, good size. Morez was one of those freshmen that produced, no doubt, but what was most tantalizing about him was the potential that he had to make that jump his second year. And let's be real with each other. I know he came back and struggled after the wrist thing. Do we have any doubt that Morez would have made a significant jump his sophomore year? Part of the reason we were so excited is because if you've watched college basketball long enough, you know that these guys, like a Morez, they just can make a big jump and often do. And he struck me as one of those. I think many would agree. So last week, as the rumors are kind of starting midweek, you're like, oh, God. And then they kind of go back and, it seems like all is quiet on the Western Front. And then Friday afternoon, I'm driving home from school. I get home, see a text from Isaac. Morez. Crap. He's gone. And there's a little bit of shell shock with that because he's a fan favorite. He's a Chicago guy, Illinois Mr. Basketball. I think he was. Maybe. Regardless. Someone I think that if you were to say, who is your favorite returning guy? We love Tommy for as talented as he is. We love Kylan, and that might be a lot of people's answer. Morez is going to be high up in that list. And there are reasons why on the court, but there's also intangible reasons why we were so excited to have one of our own, right? In a college basketball landscape where you don't often see the four-year guy, he seemed, because of his lack of height for the center position, to be your next college basketball stalwart at Illinois. Not going to happen. Now, what unfolded after that I thought was most interesting because message boards, Twitter, Derek Piper and Kedrick Prince getting quotes from Morez and his family. And listen, I have criticized Kedrick a few times on this podcast for what I have perceived to be fairly, I don't want to say lazy reporting, but he does build relationships with coaches and players. So I do think that if it's just direct quoting somebody, then okay, well, it's hard to mess that up. And Morez and his dad could simply say, if there was any misquote, hey, we didn't say that. Well, they didn't. To me, it seems very clear that Kedrick talked to both of them. Derek talked to at least Morez. And I want to kind of sift through the BS first. I think it's fair to say the primary reason that Morez left is chances for more money. He and his dad can speak all they want to about, well, we want to be able to have a mid-range game and shoot three-pointers, which I think is kind of silly, but fine. Even if they actually believe that, I think that's a secondary or even tertiary reason why Morez is leaving. We can start with the big matzo ball in front of us. It's the money. Okay, fine. Maybe there was a way for us to get more for him. Maybe there was a certain number where Brad said, nope, not going to do it. And both of those, in and of themselves, could be understandable. However, the one thing that kept coming to my mind when I was reading the quote from Morez and his dad that was going out there that Kedrick spoke to him, that was circulating through Twitter, the one thing that kept coming back to me was, if you're a coach and a player comes to you and says, Coach, I'd like more opportunities to do this or that next year offensively, you can approach it diplomatically or with a little bit of tact. What I mean is, if there is a world in which Brad or anyone on the staff said, Morez, you're a big. You aren't going to be shooting mid-range jumpers. We saw the mid-range jumper against Kentucky. Morez's dad even pointed out in the quote that, he took one mid-range jumper, he got pulled out immediately afterwards, and that seemed to stick in their craw. Okay. If you're Brad Underwood, approach that conversation with some tact or some diplomacy. Hint that, hey, listen, we're going to work with you on that part of your game. This year, you're going to work with Tommy. You guys are both going to be down low. The following year, this program, the keys are yours, Morez. You are our guy. Be a salesman, which is what Brad has to be every day of his life in that role. Be a salesman for yourself. Convince the guy that was committed to you for 3 years and played for you for 1 that this is, in fact, the best place for him. And however he framed that sales pitch, it didn't work. If money was the primary driver, as I believe it was and would understand it to be, fine. But it feels like, speculative as it may be, Brad Underwood is somehow lacking in the diplomacy department with his own guys in convincing them to stay. Now, the other thing that concerns me, I was just wondering this to myself. How concerned was Brad Underwood when he went to sleep on Friday that he just lost Morez? As a fan, I'm concerned. Morez Johnson Juniors don't grow on trees. He's a very rare talent to be that good immediately out of high school and presumably only going to get better. So I'm wondering to myself, I'm pissed off. This sucks. Brad Underwood, being a coach at his level, has to have a lot of confidence. So is he going to get not a wink of sleep because, but no, probably not. But I wonder if it's so far on the other end where there's so much pride and so much confidence and ego, which is fair to say for any D1 head coach, so much ego involved, where there's not going to be any sort of introspection or reflection on the process that led a 3-year high school commit to leave after just 1 year in your program, or any sort of introspection about how the only guys to begin and end their career with Illinois are Trent Frazier and DeMonte Williams. Coleman did graduate. He did play an extra year at Kansas State. The first 2 guys I mentioned were recruits that Underwood kept intact from John Gross's class, but they stayed. I'm not going to wash those off and say, well, they don't count. They count. But it is fair to say and accurate to say that for Brad Underwood, guys that he has recruited out of high school, not a single one has played their final year of college basketball at Illinois, or should I say graduated and played their final year. I know there's a lot of weird things here with the COVID year, the 5th year, all that, but that is a trend. And it doesn't seem to really bring him much concern. And as I pointed out in the opening segment, when you look at the teams that are in the Final Four, other than Duke with their freaking phenoms all over the court, retention, it matters. Yes, go get dudes in the portal. Go get dudes in Europe. You got a new pathway there that seems to be boding well for this program, but keep the guys that matter. Morez mattered. Now, this leads to a part of the conversation that is going to be a little bit a minefield in some respects, but let's just get it out there. Tyler Underwood. Let's do it. Let's talk about it right now. There were so many rumors, message boards, Twitter. I'm not going to put any of those out there because if you really want to dig deep enough, go to Twitter, type in Tyler Underwood, or go to Loyalty or Inquire, or just you can do that. I can't report on any unsubstantiated rumors because you shouldn't report on rumors. But let's start with some just basic conversation about what could be happening. Tyler Underwood, it should be said, as the so-called offensive coordinator of this team, has had 2 straight top 20 Ken Pom offenses. Last year, phenomenal. This year, when they hit shots, pretty damn good. They just didn't hit them well enough, but the metrics still liked Illinois' offense. It can be frustrating when they are not hitting shots, but it has worked before. So it is fair to start this conversation with, Tyler Underwood's not some sort of dunce. He might be a super bright basketball mind that has a very long and successful coaching career ahead of him. However, at the end of Morez Sr.'s quote to Kedrick Prince that was circulating all over on Friday, he did say something to the effect that, hey, Brad doesn't control the offense. To me, that seems implicit that they have issues with Tyler, and that Tyler may not have found Morez to be a focal point going forward based on the offense that he wants that team to run. Now, the fanboy part of me, this is where I went on Friday. I thought to myself, I had to watch Tyler Underwood play spot minutes at point guard for this team for 2 years. I had to watch him start a senior night game against Iowa. If you're telling me right now that Tyler Underwood is a big reason why Morez Johnson Jr. said screw this, I would be just a tidbit pissed off. Just a little bit. No, scratch that. Infuriated. Like, we don't need to dance around that, but that's an if situation. I can't say, because money, I can't say that Morez Johnson Jr. woke up and said, you know what, I'd stay at Illinois if it just weren't for Tyler Underwood. But what I do think it's fair to talk about is the effect of having a coach's son in the building in a role of influence. Imagine for a minute if you are an assistant coach that has been paying their dues up the ladder. Take a Chester Frazier. He went and became a grad assistant, I believe, at Kansas State, then became an assistant coach at Kansas State, maybe another stop before he came back to Illinois. That was a time when Brad needed a really good assistant coach after Orlando and Chin both left. Chester was he was more than a stopgap. He was a good assistant coach. Tim Anderson, ace recruiter. I don't know much in the way of his strategy or how he figures into that in a staff, but regardless, he was a guy that had been around for a long time. Imagine if you're in your 40s or mid to late 30s, in your 40s, even into your 50s. You're in the coaches meeting. You are adding your bits and pieces to the scouting or whatever other things you're talking about. You got a big board for recruiting. Let's talk about these guys. Okay, what's the next matchup? And then the 25-year-old coach's son doesn't just get a pipe in, but he has a significant voice in that room. Tell me, as a person, that might not bother some individuals, that it might not sit with them the wrong way. It's human nature. If I'm in a meeting at school and all of a sudden the principal hires their kid to be the 8th grade principal, and now I'm answering to them, and I get into a meeting and, listen, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to immediately say, nepotism. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to give them a chance. But you're saying that human nature, there wouldn't be that little thing in the back of your mind like, are you kidding me right now? Why is this jabroni in here? I know why they're here, because they're the son or the daughter of whoever it may be, but why? Like, why do I need to, guys, that's human nature. And when you factor in the egos that go with other assistant coaches, when you consider the fact that Chester Frazier left last year, and myself and many others just sort of wrote that off as, well, he wasn't figuring into your plans. The guys that he recruited weren't really the guys Brad wanted. Do we really think that there wasn't a little bit of turmoil on that staff? Are we really just going to point at a Chester Frazier who played at Illinois and came back to his own school in a time that we really needed him to? Are we really going to say that the coach's son on the staff didn't make Chester go, huh? I mean, I think that's a fair ask. I think it is. Tim Anderson, he just leaves a couple months before the season begins. We're still paying for that right now. You guarantee you Morez leaves, partially because Tim Anderson isn't here. If Tim Anderson's here, Morez ain't going anywhere. This goes back a little bit to the conversation I had about Brad and what I perceive to be a lack of tact. There are bodies in his wake, metaphorically, of coaches and players who Brad, in maybe a very nice, polite way, said, you don't factor in here anymore, bye. And you know what? I can admire the chutzpah. I can admire the sort of hard-headedness, like, hey, this is my vision, this is our path, we're going forward. Get on the train or don't. But when it starts costing you valuable players, that is when you got to stop and ask yourself, what is it driving these coaches and these players away from your program? So the Tyler Underwood thing, I can't speak to any specifics, but it is fair to say that he is the offensive coordinator. Fine. It is fair to say that he is the coach's son. And I'm sorry, on a human level, we cannot dismiss the fact that anything that perceives or has the perception of nepotism is going to rub some people the wrong way. It just is. There is a nepotism policy at the university. It's fairly vague. You can get past it as long as you got supervisor approval. What's Josh Whitman going to say to Brad Underwood after the success he had early on? Okay, you want to hire Tyler as a grad assistant? Great. Oh, you want to hire him as an assistant now that we got 5? Well, okay. It seems like you've had the success here. We're going to give that to you. This just goes back to the old thing. Never hire someone you can't fire. If, and I still use the word if, Tyler Underwood were any sort of issue at the oven offices, in the locker room, you can't fire him. I mean, you could. You aren't. Brad Underwood is not going to fire his own son. Josh Whitman is not going to go down to Brad and say, Brad, there's some things going around about Tyler. Maybe he can go coach somewhere else. That's not going to happen. So Illini fans, buckle in. You got senior and junior, not really, Brad and Tyler. They're on your staff next year. I know a lot of Illini fans are fed up with this, that, or the other about Brad and his coaching ability, especially in game. I know a lot of the chorus this year has gotten more and more about Tyler and Zach Hamer, your offensive and defensive guys. And I haven't really addressed that so much because I thought, well, it starts with the guy at the top. But the problem here is that the guy at the top hired his son to begin with. And if it is an issue, there's not a damn thing you can do about it. There's not. So if you want to get really, existential dread about this and think that, we have seen the better days of Underwood and now those might not be in the future, well, then if that's the case, you're going down with Brad and Tyler. I mean, that's the worst case scenario here, which I don't necessarily think is where we're at right now. But if there were Illini fans that feel a little bit kind of like stuck, I get it, because I don't like the appearance of it either. Zach Hamer, defensive coordinator, whatever. I mean, go get a guy that actually knows how to coach defense. Don't take the video coordinator and say, oh, you're our defensive guru now. Get a guy. And maybe Brad will. Nothing's happened yet. It's only been a week, but you would like to see some more movement. Tre White. Let's go back to the 4-game stretch where he played a minute. 1 minute. He was ill, fine. I was at the Michigan State game, the Terrence Shannon Jr. upside-down jersey game. Tre White did not play a single minute in that game. a matchup that actually probably would have been pretty good for him. Are we really to believe that that 4-game stretch, especially the 2 where he got do not plays, didn't have some sort of impact on Tre White and his decision? And then when he does start playing again, oh, look, he's actually a pretty good college basketball player. And now he's gone. A double-digit scorer, efficient from the field, good defender, good rebounder, gone. Tre White is not a superstar. Tre Whites, however, do not grow on trees, just like Morez Johnson Jr.'s, especially when they've already been in your program for a year. And now they're just gone. Now, am I going to be able to point back and say, man, if only we had Tre White? I don't know next year if I'm going to have many moments of that. But the thing is I said a few times, man, that was the quietest 20-10 performance I've ever seen because Tre White just happened to kind of clean things up. If he wanted a more featured role and then that wasn't in the plans, okay, fine. But again, for Christ's sake, you are a salesman. If it's brute honesty, sorry, Tre, you aren't a 1A guy. Like, you're our third option. Have some freaking tact. Tre, we appreciate your contributions this year. You're a valued player on both sides of the ball. In our offense, these are the opportunities you're going to have, and these are areas you want to grow in. Yeah, we'll work those in. And even if there's a modicum of BS in what you're telling him, be a freaking diplomat for your own program. Be a salesman for your own program. And I just don't know if he has it in him. I'm not going to applaud Brad Underwood. If we continue to lose, guys, I'm not going to applaud his puffing out the chest. I'm Brad Underwood. Do it my way or get the F out. I'm not going to applaud that. Not when you find yourself entering another season, and this we can say this with certainty almost right now, with a mostly brand new roster. That's the reality we're facing right now. And I don't know what's going to happen with Tommy. I don't know what's going to happen with Kylan. I would assume Kylan stays. He moved back home. But I don't like this position. I don't. And it does feel different than, Adam Miller left. Well, you still were working on Kofi. You had Trent. You had DeMonte. Go get a shooter to replace Adam. And they did. And Brad could do that again. But whatever rabbit he pulls out of a hat here, whether it's Dame Sarr, who we're still waiting on that, or other guys, to go from what was reported and understood to be the core 4 returning to now 2 of them gone does raise at least a yellow flag from me. And that dreaded word concern that I got a lot of crap for after the 20-point loss at Wisconsin, one of many double-digit losses this year. This just leads me to this point. Because things have been good before, don't be blinded to what's going on right now. I think it would behoove us to be paying close attention to this offseason and how it unfolds to then decide, okay, well, going into next year, what are our expectations? I don't fault any Illini fan for pointing their ire at the coach's son. Is it a futile endeavor? Yep, it is. Is it human nature to say, well, there might be an issue here? Yes, there is. Or it is, I should say. It's a frustrating start to the offseason, quite simply. And we might get good news this week. We might get bad news. I'm not going to try to get too high up or down with it, but when you start the offseason with Morez Johnson Jr. leaves, that's not a good start to the offseason. And you'd love to be a fly on the wall. I'd love to be one at Ubben right now and try to kind of gather, okay, what's the vibe over there? Are they super competent? I don't think Brad Underwood ever lacks confidence. But what's the old adage? Pride comes before the fall. I don't expect Illinois to take a precipitous drop because his track record suggests that he always brings in dudes. But I am starting to wonder, what is the true ceiling here if this is what every offseason looks like? What is the true ceiling with Brad Underwood if that's the case? Now, for younger fans, like the guys from the boardroom that we had a great conversation with, I understand why, if they grew up in the John Gross era, and then all of a sudden they are experiencing 6 straight tournaments, why the mere idea of discussing Brad's future is just silly. I understand that. And it is me, I'm towing that line here because I do want to, and I keep reemphasizing, this is not a discussion about get rid of Brad Underwood, because you shouldn't, given his form of success and his ability to bring talent in. I'm just asking for the leaks in the dam to be patched up. And my concern comes from, does Brad Underwood, A, see those leaks? And B, is he able to patch them up? Ask yourselves this. The season we had last year, okay, they make the tournament, they lose in the second round. 2 NBA first-round picks, and a lot of talent around that. There were highs, there were lows. If you were to repeat that season over the next 2-3 years, where are you at? Are you okay with it? I mean, making tournaments is nice. It would be a foolish statement for me to say, we hired Brad Underwood, man, I just want to make tournaments. Guess what? He's making tournaments, and he's not really sweating out Selection Sunday. Okay, well, my big goal for whoever the coach after Gross was, that has been accomplished with gusto. However, the only thing I would pause in a macro sense and say, well, wait a second. Reevaluation is okay here. When we hired Brad Underwood, NIL was not a reality. The transfer portal was not a reality, at least not to nearly the extent it is now. So, with that in mind, we are in a completely different paradigm. This is not operating under any old assumptions. John Gross only made 1 tournament, and he missed his last 4. Brad's made his last 6. Therefore, everything's perfect. Now, no one's saying that, but, I mean, I think that people are leery to be too critical because of the objective success. But if I'm a big donor right now, Icon Collective, whatever, okay, if I'm one of the big boosters and I see Morez leave and I see Tre leave, I see the only name that we've gotten in is Josh Dix, who's a really good shooting guard, but he's got other places to go visit. I'm wondering, okay, well, what's Brad's plan? In a way that I didn't wonder last year. We all knew last year was going to have to go out and get a brand new roster, and they did that over the course of a couple months, and they did a pretty good job of it. But this year, I don't know. Call it a vibe, call it a gut feeling. I don't know what the path is right now. I know what the path is in the immediate future. You got to get Tommy and Colin back. If you do that, then I feel like, okay, well, that's still 2 guys you can build a team around. If one of them were to leave, then we got a problem. And I don't think it would be outrageous to think, oh, crap. Not only are you losing your core, but you're having to you're going to have to do last season again. And if we really look at the roster construction last year, this is why you could be optimistic going forward. Brad Underwood still got a lot of dudes. I know Benham Rickhouse didn't work out, though he might be back. And imagine a world in which you're going there for the starting 5. Benham Rickhouse is back in the starting lineup. You're telling me that that'll sit well with a bunch of Illini fans? Where's Morez? Right, he left. Where's Ben? He's still here. Ugh. I mean, come on. That's going to be the reaction of a lot of people. Based on performance this year, probably so. Again, another thing that's been bandied about, and I don't think it's unfair, is the fact that it took until well into January for you to start realizing, wait, maybe Morez should take some of Ben's minutes. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe instead of playing Ben 34 minutes a game, it should be 15. It took you an entire freaking season to figure that out. Again, if are you going to fault Morez Johnson or his dad, who did not specifically say anything about Ben, but what are they going to do? Throw a former player under the bus? But you're saying that seeds weren't planted in December, where it took until the bragging rights game to finally say, hey, maybe Morez should be a more focal point of the team because Ben is bad defensively and he's not making shots. It plants seeds. The best coaches of Phil Jackson, why he was so successful with the talent that he had, he massaged egos. He had tact. He knew what to say to each individual to make them feel good about themselves and their role on the team. Does Brad have that ability? I don't know. What is Brad good at? Getting talent. I think overall being the CEO of a program. He's got kind of that, as far as, being the face for a fan base and all that, he's good with all that. But the in-game strategy we've already talked about. Now I'm starting to be concerned about the fact that, well, okay, what is going on in-house for these guys to not want to stay? And a final apples and oranges thing before I get to this YouTube chat feed. Brett Bielema, Brad Underwood. Football, basketball, two completely different things. Yeah, they're only across the street from one another. But Brett Bielema is setting himself up for greater success by retaining the guys that matter the most. And you know that Gabe Akis got offered more money from other places, but he said, I like it here. I'll take a little bit less money so I can stay with the coach that I love playing for. And that goes down the list to Xavier Scott, to, Luke was going to come back, but regardless, well, I don't know. I mean, he could have been lured somewhere. You know that plenty of teams would have paid Luke Altmaier a lot of money to go there, and he nipped that in the butt in December and said, nope, I'm staying here. Guys, things could not be more starkly different between what's going on at the Smith Performance Center and the Ubben practice facility. Things could not be more different in terms of that. And the final point I'll make, I was talking with my dad about this last night. What's the culture? I've always had an issue with hashtag everyday guys because despite the success that Brad Underwood has had, there is 2 years ago, there was no everyday guys there. There was no everyday guys this year. And there's no everyday guys as a program because you can't say everyday guys and continue to lose your everyday guys. You can't. Get a new tagline like hashtag random studs. I don't know. Which he does get those. They aren't every day. There's not a continuity in place to act like we have that much of a culture. So I don't want to hear that crap. Just, Brad, stop throwing bananas in front of your Mario Kart, okay? If Brad's on a little Mario Kart thing going with Bowser and Yoshi, quit throwing bananas in front of yourself. Just hands on 10 and 2. The hands on 10 and 2 scenario would have been keep the core, build around it. That's gone. It's a very frustrating place to be. And I hope it works out because I don't want to root for a crap team. I don't think it'll get there, but you're in a weird kind of limbo right now. And I don't think you had to be there. And I think that speaks to some things that might be amiss over there. Eventually, everybody, if a bunch of coaches and a bunch of players keep leaving, you got to start pointing the finger at the top and asking questions. I worry that there's still a lot of Illini fans that the mere broaching that idea, it just turns them off. And I want to be clear one last time before I get the YouTube feed here. The success has been there. You should acknowledge and appreciate that success. Brett Underwood's legacy here is secure, and I hope he builds on that. But it is okay to appreciate what's come before and hope that it continues to get better, or more importantly, that it doesn't get worse. All right, YouTube feed. You guys have been patient. I appreciate it. All right, let's see here. Eric has a lot of concerns, and Seth says that Brad was a stock he peaked last year. And Eric said earlier, there's no culture right now in men's basketball. Ethan listening while making bacon this morning. Hello, Ethan. This is from Seth. How has Sampson at Houston only had 3 players transfer out in 10 years? Brad's had 3 in the first week. I didn't even mention Kerry Booth, but we don't need to worry about that. No, Seth, listen, Kelvin Sampson, I know a scummy past with what happened in Indiana, but the dude is an amazing coach. Same could be said for Bruce Pearl, which I know, a little bile came into my mouth right there by just saying that, but Zara says he needs to get rid of Tyler and Hamer. Well, Zara, he won't get rid of Tyler. That's not going to happen. And Hamer, sure. I mean, if this team had a better defense, you saw what happened in the Kentucky second half. You were scoring fine as that half went on, but when you gave up a 10-0 run because your defense completely sucks, then the game's over. So the defense hurt this team far more than offense this year. This is from Seth. Starting Humrick House, 26 games over Morez, and Will is egregious management. Seth, 26 starts for Ben Humrickhouse. I mean, it speaks for itself. I know the old adage of, well, it doesn't matter who starts, it matters who gets the minutes at the end of the day. And that did balance out a little bit, but Ben still averaged about 7 or 8 minutes more per game than Morez Johnson. Morez was in practice the whole time. Players know. Morez was a 4/5-star guy coming out of high school, one of the most anticipated recruits coming in. If we can't pinpoint Ben Hemrickhouse being the reason he left, but the rotations used by Underwood this year, which were truly puzzling a lot of the season, could not have helped. All right, from Kyle. I just don't know what kind of offense we run. It certainly seems to be recruit talented players and let them shoot threes. Well, Kyle, they went back to the 5-out this year. Last year, they incorporated the booty ball. I mean, these are simple concepts. The thing that I would argue, if Tyler isn't in charge of the offense, what does Tyler know that Brad doesn't? In other words, if I'm Brad Underwood and I actually want to do my son a solid, and I was talking with some friends about this yesterday. One of my friends said, hey, Brad's just too good of a dad. He's not going to fire Tyler. And one of my friends said, is that really being a good dad, though? Like, it's not about firing your son. It's about saying, go out and spread your wings elsewhere. Learn under some other guys. I mean, Brad has to have a network. He keeps bringing these guys in for the Coaches vs. Cancer thing. He clearly is well-liked in coaching circles. Find a spot for Tyler. Many people would take him. Let him go experience it somewhere else. And whatever perspectives he has on offense, well, they're already in the house. They're already in-house. Do you really need Tyler sitting next to you to be the guy that he talks to most during games? We see that. He's talking to Tyler more than he's talking to Jeff or Orlando. Guys, perception eventually becomes reality. If you are perceived to be playing favorites, it doesn't matter if you are or are not. The perception is what people see, and it's what they're going to take with them. This is from Ben. I continue to fear that our program does not have a cohesive vision on how it wants to play and a true culture. Each departure has made sense in a vacuum, but the trend is not good, coaches and players. Excellent point there, Ben, and I would agree with that. He continues, what's Brad's plan? Has been my question each year. Our style of play is new every year or two. It feels like chasing a shiny object. Yeah, Ben, I mean, it does each year seem like, ooh, we got new toys. But, well, I think the offense, they discovered last year what they wanted to do with that, and they went and got shooters, and they'll probably try that again this year because the shooters didn't really shoot well last year. I do wonder, like you do, I mean, what is the long-term plan? Defensively, there's not one right now. There's just not. From AO, as a program, are we settling? Brad did elevate us, but it's time for a change. My concern is Underwood has Whitman wrapped around his finger with all his salesmanship. AO, I don't know if I'd be so sure about that. Whitman doesn't need to come out and say anything, but if you really think about it this year, he hasn't said anything in regards to basketball. I do want to ask listeners this question. Who do you trust more? Brad Underwood to put you in position to make deep March runs, or Josh Whitman to find good replacements at the time called for it? Who do you trust more, Josh Whitman or Brad Underwood? Right now, the answer for me would be Josh Whitman. I mean, he did it with Shauna Green. He did it with Brad. He did it with Brett Bielema. He didn't do it with Lovey, and he didn't do it with Nancy Faye. Those didn't work. They worked pretty terribly as well, but Josh is 3 for 3 in his last Revenue Sports hires. So, since you brought it up, AO, let's talk about this. I mean, I think the example I use as a Yankees fan, Buck Showalter is a lifer in baseball. He's had success everywhere he's gone. I don't believe, has ever won a title. Now, he was the Yankees manager in the early to mid-'90s, up through 95. And he got them back to the playoffs in 95, and they lost in 5 games in the division series to Seattle. It was a great series. Game 5 was a crazy finish at the Kingdome. And no one would have anticipated at that point that Mel Stottlemyre, Buck Showalter would be gone. Mel Stottlemyre was the pitching coach. Okay, so they go out and get Joe Torre. And you know what happened. There are examples on both sides with sports. There are examples where you move on from someone because you felt they peaked, and then it got worse. There are examples of guys that, you felt hit their peak, and they moved on, and things got better. You can cherry pick either one of those. The fact is, there'd be no guarantee that moving on from Brad Underwood would be beneficial for this program. There's no guarantee of that. That's a risk. The question that the only way that Josh Whitman would have to start entertaining something like this is if he felt the risk of Brad Underwood was greater than of keeping Brad Underwood was greater than the risk of getting rid of him. That's the only time in which Josh Whitman would even start to consider something like that. And that would be the right approach, is just if you think that it is more risky to keep Brad in this program's current state than going out there and getting someone else, then you consider it. But are we at that point? I don't think we're at that point yet. I tell you what, though, when you go on Twitter and message boards, you would get a different impression. It seems like there's a lot of ticked off Illini fans right there. And I get it, and I feel a lot of those same things. And this is, all of a sudden, what was going to be an important offseason becomes, I think, massive. Because let's say, hypothetically, it does not go well this offseason, and they come out next year and they struggle. What would struggling look like? I don't know. Bubble team? I don't think it gets worse than that with Brad Underwood. I mean, his track record kind of speaks for itself there. But let's say it was that situation where you're middling in the Big Ten and you're like bubble team, last 4 in, or you get a 10 or 11 seed. Do you start getting donors and people like that a little more antsy and kind of pushing the issue a little bit? That would be interesting. I don't know. Crazy. Okay. This is from Kyle. And let's see here. A couple more here. One from Kyle, one from Seth. Kyle says, talent and wins aside, I'm tired of learning so many new players every year. Didn't even try until the Bears season was over this year. Kyle, I think that that's the reality for many teams, the feeling that you're learning a bunch of new players. The Michigan State and Purdue examples that people have thrown out are rare in terms of they recruit high schoolers and they keep them. That is rare. Most teams are dealing with new names and new faces. I understand the frustration with that. I embrace it to an extent. I just feel like the balancing act is what's going to help you achieve greater success. So you'd like Kyle to have gone into next year with the core 4 and then some new faces. And that seemed to be the plan, but now they have to pivot. And because of that, Kyle, next year, yeah, you betcha, you're going to have to learn 7 or 8 new names. From Seth, why would they not all put their names in the portal, get well paid, and find a coach with a structured system? Well, it might be going that way. One thing to say about Underwood is he has shown the ability to retain guys before. He retained Terrence Shannon Jr. That was important. He retained Coleman Hawkins for another year. That was huge. He brought back Kofi for his junior year. That was huge. Io, but that was kind of the portal wasn't really quite as full swing by the time Io left. So he's kept really good players before. But it's just starting to feel, and it's more than just perception, the trend suggests that a lot more are leaving. One more here from Ethan. If you move on from Brad, how quickly, honestly, do people think we'll get back to where we are now? If you say anything quicker than 5-6 years, you're delusional. I don't know about that, Ethan. I'm not as worried about Illinois going in the toilet or having to do some rebuild. That's not what's in place right now. Now, Brad does have a distinct advantage, and as I'm going to read here from Andrew, he gets dudes. He does have a distinct advantage built in because he knows the Big Ten. He has been here going on 9 years now. This is going to be his 9th season. So, yes, of course that's advantageous to some new guy. That's why I'm not going to come on here and say, guys, cut ties with him, go get Texas Tech's coach. I don't know if McCasland would work here. I don't know. I mean, he could come up here and be a fish out of water, and it wouldn't work at all. I saw Sean Miller earlier. Well, Sean Miller is a really good coach, but I don't know. I mean, you handily beat them. I know that was Xavier, apples and oranges, but, like, That was an illustration of how talent can win over any other issue you might have. But no, I don't agree necessarily, Ethan, that a change sets your program back. 6-7 years ago, I would have agreed. 100%. But it's just, that's not, I don't think the current situation in college basketball where there is a transfer portal and there is NIL budgets, which are only going to get bigger with revenue sharing and all that. So you are in a great spot as Illinois basketball, the program. Brad Underwood has a huge amount of, oops, sorry, music's playing. Brad Underwood has a lot of, if not the most reason of anybody, as to why that's the case, why your program is in the place that it's at. I think the only question is if we're going to chart, like, do you expect greater successes from Brad Underwood going forward, right? After last year, and of course an Elite Eight appearance helps that, but it seemed like that, coupled with the NIL budget and Brad's ability to go out and identify talent, which he is exceptional at, that we're made in the shade, baby. Like, we got this. But as you look at things starting to equalize in college basketball, to an extent, and what I mean by that is even though more names are going in the portal, you're seeing the cream that rises to the top are the teams that keep guys once they bring them in, and they keep them for more than a year. That's not happening right now. So while there's no fault of Brad's that two of those players go in the NBA, and that's a huge coup for this program, and he should be able to parlay that into success this offseason and a long offseason ahead. The other attrition going on in this roster right now, and knock on wood, no more, other than maybe a DGL or something, which seems inevitable, that you are not going to be in any conversations with the likes of a Houston or a Duke. Well, Duke's Duke. Don't screw that. A Houston or a Florida or an Auburn. Think about that for a second. Last point I got today. A Houston, a Florida, and an Auburn are not historically great basketball programs. Now, Florida, in the last 30 years, you could argue they kind of have been. Billy Donovan wins 2. They're back in the Final Four. They've had a lot of success. But Houston, you'd have to go back to Hakeem Olajuwon. It took a great coach who had a plan and is instituting that plan. And while not everybody on Houston might have been high school recruits coming in, once they get there, they stay there for multiple years. And that's why year in, year out, Houston's where they're at. That's why Bruce Pearl, for all the scumminess that is included with him, is having success. It's also the reason Bruce Pearl's Auburn team lost to Yale last year in the first round. That inexperience really hurt them. They hadn't played together all that long. They took the lump last year. Everybody came back with some stud freshmen, and now they're doing what they're doing. He's not losing guys. If Brad Underwood wants to speak about national championships, and I admire him for that, fine, but have a plan in place to do that. The one this year got you to a second-round exit, and that was with a lot of talent. He could go out and get the equal amount of talent this year, and that wouldn't guarantee anything more than a second-round exit. We got to build a little more long-term here. And it just seems like Brad, again, hands on 10 and 2, Brad. Just drive this car down the interstate. Hey, you can go 8-9 miles over the speed limit, but just 10 and 2, Brad, please. And it just seems like that would be a much more successful path. It just seems like too much manic, chaotic noise for a program that he turned around and he made successful, and he can have greater success, but are we getting in our own way? I'm just thinking out loud. A couple things here. This is from Andrew. Indiana has no players left from the 24-25 roster. My Wisconsin fan friends hate guard. I mean, I don't blame them, Andrew. And their turnover. And he keeps guys, though. It's just the guys he keeps are kind of whatever. I mean, they got lucky with Tanjay. Sorry, Andrew, I'm kind of interjecting there. They got really lucky with Tanjay. Again, from Andrew, we aren't alone. It's the same new guys every year. Brad gets dudes at least. That is true. Let's see here. From Eric, look how fast Michigan won in year one of a new coach. So it does change. But yeah, I mean, now Michigan, I do think Dusty May's just an exceptional coach. There's a chance that next year he goes out and gets new guys, which he'll have to with all the veterans that are on that team, and it won't work. St. Dominic's. Oh, you're nice, St. Dominic. I love your commentary. You're the only one honest. I don't think that's the case, St. Dominic. I was listening to Jeremy and Derek, and they have what I view to be an unenviable position of having to cover this team, and your sources are within that office, and yet still acknowledging some of the things that are going not so good. Now, one thing I noticed in their last podcast, and what I talked about more than they did, they did not really get into any sort of the perception issues that arise when you have a coach's son on the sideline. I did that today for the first time. And if that seems knee-jerk reaction, I would understand that. Why didn't I talk about that before? Well, it's a good question. I think when there are enough tea leaves out there in the Morez Sr. quote about, well, Brad doesn't control the offense. And then, listen, I'm not going to report on any rumors because rumors are rumors, but eventually, if there's so much smoke, a perception starts to build. They could all be inaccurate rumors, but they're percolating at such a high level that eventually that's what people are going to think about it. And you might say, well, Carp, are you going to make a coaching change based on perception instead of reality? That seems a little bit silly. It does seem silly, but we're talking about college sports where when you're recruiting people and there's negative recruiting against you, everything matters. Everything matters. And if you are even perceived to have favoritism towards one staff guy because he's your son and he gets the keys to the offense, if I'm a guy with a particular skill set, I'm wondering, well, man, if I'm not like tailor-made to this, then they won't want to use me. They won't even think about adjusting anything in the offense for me. They're just going to go with what the coach's son wants to do. Guys, that's what worries me about a perception that could grow. It's probably already out there. I don't want it to get worse. And you don't, as a head coach, really have a whole lot in the way to combat that. You just have to sell what you can sell. And if you start answering any negative recruiting or any negative criticism about someone on your coaching staff, then you're acknowledging that it exists. It's like an impossible situation, and it goes back to the main point. Don't hire someone you can't fire. Don't do it. You are stuck with him for better or worse. And his offense has measurably been good, but you are stuck. So even if things went way off the rails, he ain't going anywhere. So, like, he's here. Fine. Okay. I hope it works out, and I hope there's not internal strife, and I hope there's not any reasons why players or coaches are like, ugh, screw this, and that it's all just silly smoke. But smoke is still smoke. All right, a couple more things. I know this is a longer podcast. From AO, sometimes you got to overpay your core guys to keep some continuity and go out and get two studs. That's all we had to do this year. The core was there to keep. AO, I agree. And the money thing, if Morez wanted two, pay him two. We need to stop falling in this. I see this on the message boards. Well, guys, he's not worth $2 million. Okay, his freshman year, he wasn't worth $2 million. You're telling me he's not going to take a jump? There's always risk involved. You're not guaranteed that Morez is going to come out and be an all Big Ten player his sophomore year. But you are, as free agency goes in any league, and now that's essentially what we have with NIL, you are paying for potential. You are paying for what they might do going forward, more than you are for what they did the year before. That's the market. I mean, yeah, I would have paid. I would have. Like, I got the money to. I think the donors would have scrounged out $2 million to keep Morez. I think they would have. It's speculative. I'm not running Flexingate, or I don't know if Shad Khan's even one of the donors, but, like, I think they would have scrounged it together. All right. Ethan says, thank you. One more point. Ethan says, I will say I'm a little concerned about Sincere and Dane's comments that are subtly, subtly? How is that such a hard word to say? They're subtle knocks at the Illini staff, essentially, is what you're saying, Ethan. I want to pull that up real quick before I get out of here. And I don't disagree. It's like we have been completely inundated with stuff the last few days, and I damn near forgot about it. Okay, here we go. Sincere said on Saturday afternoon to all the college basketball fans, y'all don't know what goes on inside the basketball program on why players are leaving. It's not about money or anything. Dane retweeted that. Dane Danger. I got to find his Twitter handle here. Good old Dane. What a stud. And he just retweeted saying literally. Well, that might not be. There's nothing in there that says it's about Illinois, Ethan. But yeah, I'm concerned. And again, if I'm Morez and I enjoyed my experience, and I can make 1.5 at Illinois, or I can make 2 at someplace else, my mind is going to try to keep me at that place. Again, Brett Bielema, Brad Underwood. There's your divergence between those two. Brett Bielema is doing more with less. Brad Underwood has a lot. And I'd just like to see him maximize. I'd like to see that return on investment that is all out there about our NIL budget. It's top 12 in the nation. It was number 2 in the Big Ten this year. You finished 7th in the Big Ten. Number 1 was Indiana. They did even worse. But it just goes to show, if you got that money and you can pair that with continuity on the roster, then that's when the really good things are going to happen. That's out the window for next year. And that's a frustrating place to be. All right. Man, I went long, everybody. I appreciate you guys sticking around. And AO, appreciate it. Eric, you too. If you guys could do me a favor before you leave, if you hit that thumbs up button on the YouTube page there. And then also one more thing before you leave in the chat window. Let me know how the sound quality was. The video, I think, is a little bit better. This is my new iPhone Pro Max 16. So just let me know how the audio sounded on your end. I was hoping it was a little bit louder and more clear for all of you. But I appreciate those tuning in on a Monday morning. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Before I get out of here, a reminder, the best way to support the 200 level is to support our sponsors. We have Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits. Got to thank them. Also, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Luke, big Illini fan. They are working on plenty of home projects this spring, so get a free quote and check out a gallery of their work at owenbuildersllc.com. Also, got to thank State Farm agent Brian Hansen. Let's see here. It's been staticky, huh? I'll check that audio, guys. Let's see. Has it been consistently staticky, or do you think it's maybe a little distorted or too loud? Kyle or Ethan, you guys let me know. And then State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he could be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. And finally, got to thank Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. All right. Okay, I'll check that, guys. But hey, I appreciate all your support on the YouTube feed and those that are listening at home via podcast. We will be back whenever news hits. Well, I shouldn't say whenever, because a lot of news will hit, but we will be back throughout this offseason. So you guys have a good rest of your day, and we will see you soon. It is the 200 level. All right, thanks, YouTube. I'll work on that. Doggone it. I think I probably just had. Stay there for 1 sec if you guys can. And a check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Pow, pow, pow. Sibilance. Craig, you mentioned small pop from plosive consonants. I think I might just put the feed a little bit too loud in there. So check 1, 2, pow, pow, pow. All right. As I said, we will be back kind of at the ready whenever things happen. So, we'll see. Nah, it's probably not you, Ethan. New technology, and I mean the image is good. I got a new cord for this. That's why the last couple were not even done with video. So, yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you all soon.